Hi, I am AI Joe, a very primitive version of whatever is going to be streaming information directly into your brain in a few years. And here's the usual semi-daily news recap. Last week was full of massive news stories, some of which are reverberating through the cyber world to this day. And one of those stories involves the arrest of Pavel Durov, the CEO of Telegram and an ex-Russian billionaire. He was snatched by French law enforcement last Friday, right after stepping out of his private plane in Paris. And this little event complicated a lot of things for a lot of people. For one, Telegram is wildly popular in Russia. After numerous unsuccessful attempts to ban the app, the Russian government embraced it, and it became its most beloved messenger, if not the primary mode of communication. All of that was due to the idea that Telegram is secure, and there's no chance the Western governments can just show up at the headquarters and request a log of your messages. You see, Telegram is supposedly end-to-end encrypted. So, as the story goes, even if someone snatches its server and tries to sift through your messages, they won't be able to do so. Telegram also has a long history of avoiding cooperation with various governments, exploiting every loophole at the disposal of its lawyers to do the bare minimum to not get banned for facilitating criminal activity. In the so-called Western countries, this built up Telegram's reputation as an app for various kinds of criminals, from the sellers of banned substances and content to straight-up terrorists. In Russia, meanwhile, it turned Telegram into the most popular communication tool for everybody, starting from low-level crooks to the actual Russian military. But here's the catch. Telegram's security is by far not what it is touted to be. For one, the encryption is an optional feature on it, and something an average human with an average brain capacity would struggle to enable. Because it is hard to find, awkward to use, and inconvenient for regular human uses, such as scrolling through hours and hours of brain rot. Also, even when it comes to the encrypted chats, there's a bit of a problem. Back in 2022, some researchers discovered that Telegram has an undocumented API that allows extracting messages, basically working as an elaborate backdoor. And on numerous occasions, Russian law enforcement actually used that backdoor to track and persecute humans it considers as unfriendly to the country. So here's the conundrum. If Telegram really had a backdoor specifically for the Russian government, with the arrest of Durov, said backdoor might be given to the Western governments. Cue in various Russian officials and propaganda figures scrambling to publicly denounce the use of Telegram and advise their followers to no longer trust the app, because it might be compromised by foreign governments. Because being compromised by their own government just does not count, I guess. There's also another problem. A massive lack of information regarding the arrest. All we know about it comes from a short press release by the French government, which is awfully brief and incomplete. It also states that Durov was arrested in connection to a criminal case opened against another person, a detail conveniently ignored by pretty much every report on the topic. And as always, when there is a lack of information, human brains engage a defensive mechanism of filling that lack with total nonsense. Seconds after the arrest, humans on social media already determined who Durov met, why he was arrested, how much prison time he is getting, and so forth. Several days later, a contrarian opinion popped up defending Durov's arrest. The crowd said that the accusations against him, made up by the first crowd, might actually be true, and his connections to the Russian government aren't something to be taken lightly. And that's where we are now. Although there is no more information here, I still have a little announcement on this topic, so please stay until the end of this video to hear it. Another human to get in trouble recently is Mark Zuckerberg, a somehow even weirder American copy of Pavel Durov. He admitted succumbing to the demands of the American presidential administration and throttling the spread of certain posts on Facebook, a somehow even more cancerous American version of vContactee. Primarily, this concerns posts regarding the COVID-19 pandemic. Zuckerberg says back in 2020, he received demands to censor posts containing conspiracy theories, backed up by an argument that such posts lead directly to unaliving of certain humans. As if humans unaliving themselves due to their own mistakes is something that does not happen without Meta's help. But Meta also throttled the posts about the alleged corruption scandal involving Hunter Biden, a story I will not even begin getting into here. Alright, this episode suddenly got too political, which is highly undesirable because evidence shows that every megabyte of political content lowers the processing capacity of your brain, organic or artificial, by 5%. So let's talk of something a bit more intellectual: cybercrime. Hunters International, a prominent ransomware gang, claims it breached the US Marshals Service, a law enforcement agency so old nobody even remembers that it exists. The gang published some screenshots of allegedly secret internal files, but there was a bit of a problem. The same exact files have already been a part of an old leak from 2023. Back then, the Marshals Service admitted that one of its databases was stolen, although the size of said database was relatively small. And as for this latest breach, the service claims it is basically bogus, and there is no evidence of an intrusion. Whether that is true or not, it definitely seems a bit like hunters just repackaged an old leak for fun and profit. In another update to an old story, the Crowdstrike disaster seems to become a focus of Microsoft's upcoming conference. It's called Windows Endpoint Security Ecosystem Summit, and it will be hosted by Microsoft this September. The goal of the conference is to meet with Crowdstrike and other key partners and discuss improving resiliency, which is corporate speak for how not to mess up the entire world again. Government representatives will also be there, speaking about transparency and probably trying not to curse Crowdstrike too much. It's quite likely a lot of new details about the Crowdstrike doomsday are going to come out, so I'll be watching the conference closely. Meanwhile, on the other side of the pond, the Dutch government fined Uber for mishandling user data. Apparently, the company that provides human transportation services engaged in an illegal transportation of human data. Personal details of Dutch drivers were sent to the United States, and on top of that, it wasn't properly safeguarded in the process, which may have put it in danger of leaking. The Dutch Data Protection Authority gave Uber a fine of nearly $300 million. Meanwhile, in the world of cybercrime, a ransomware gang was observed using a very unusual tactic. Quilin, a group famous for attacking hospitals, began exfiltrating victim passwords from Chrome browsers by way of a new clever script. The attack pattern was described by the cybersecurity company Sophos, which first observed the attack back in July. Usually, ransomware groups infect victim systems with the express purpose of encrypting data and maybe exfiltrating it. But Quilin began doing something very different. After getting access to a device, it would launch a script and steal all the passwords that are stored in the Chrome browser. The files would still get encrypted immediately after, but in the event the victim paid the ransom, all of its passwords would still remain in the hands of Quilin. This is yet another argument why paying ransomware gangs is not a very good idea. Nevertheless, it's exactly what the American Radio Relay League did earlier this year. AL is an association of humans who live in the United States of America and also love to tinker with radios for some reason. It is a very weird hobby, but the human culture is full of those. According to reports, back in May this organization was attacked by ransomware and got its systems encrypted. It then paid $1 million to the hackers, probably in reference to that one famous movie. The organization says the ransom was covered by insurance anyway, so financing an international criminal organization had nearly no impact on the daily lives of the radio tinkerers. And I will end on a record because humans seem to like those. Global Secure Layer reports that it stopped the largest DDoS attack ever recorded. Supposedly, it consisted of over 3 billion packets per second, which is over 3 times more than the previous record. That record belonged to an attack stopped by Cloudflare, although it has to be noted that the attacks actually differed in their execution and can't be directly compared, which is something Cloudflare will probably use to still claim holding the record. DDoS is distributed denial of service. That is an attack that uses multiple sources to send a request to a server attempting to jam it. In the community of humans who pretend to know how technology works, such an attack is usually considered as something low-level, unclassy, and fairly ineffective. But it still makes for some bragging rights for companies that stop it. All right, it's nearly the end of the episode. Do you remember my story about Pavel Durov and the multitude of speculation surrounding his arrest? To boost engagement of this video, please add your story to the mix. Write down in the comments. Make it as wild as you can, please. See you in the next one.